Nobody feared Pavel Datsyuk because of his size. Nobody feared him because of his speed. And nobody feared him because he piled up ridiculous numbers on the scoreboard. They feared him because every time he stepped on the ice, something strange happened. Defensemen hesitated. Goalies guessed wrong. Entire plays collapsed before they even started. And the worst part? Most of the time, Datsyuk didn't even look like he was trying. Here's the part that messes with people's heads. If you only look at the stats, Pavel Datsyuk doesn't scream most dominant player in the league. He never hit 100 points. He never won MVP. He wasn't the fastest, the biggest, or the loudest star on the ice. Yet when NHL players were anonymously asked one simple question, who is the hardest player to play against? The answer kept coming back the same. Pavel Datsyuk, not Crosby, not Ovechkin, not the guys filling highlight reels with goals. Datsyuk, that's not normal. And that's where this story actually begins. Because this documentary is not about how he scored goals. It's about how he made grown professionals feel helpless. Fast forward to the early 2000s. Detroit is loaded. Veterans everywhere. Future Hall of Famers stacked on every line. And into this locker room walks a quiet guy from Russia who barely speaks English, slouches when he walks, and doesn't say much to anyone. No hype, no attitude, no ego. At first glance, he blends into the background. Then practice starts, and suddenly, players who have been in the league for a decade start stopping what they're doing just to watch him. Because the puck doesn't behave normally when it's on his stick. It disappears. It changes direction without warning. It ends up behind you before your brain catches up. Brett Hull, a man who played with Wayne Gretzky, watched Datsyuk for the first time and said something that says everything. He's the sickest player I've ever seen. Not the fastest, not the strongest, the sickest. That wasn't hype. That was confusion. Because Datsyuk didn't beat you the way stars usually do. He didn't overpower you. He didn't blow past you. He waited. He let you make the first move, let you lean, let you commit. And the moment you thought you had control, the puck was gone. That's why this isn't a story about flash. It's a story about control. And it didn't matter if you were a rookie or a superstar. If you played against Pavel Datsyuk long enough, one thing was guaranteed. At some point, he was going to make you look silly, and you wouldn't even know how he did it. But here's the twist. This guy didn't arrive in the NHL as a sure thing. He didn't come in with expectations. He wasn't marketed. Most teams didn't even notice him. In fact, when his name was finally called on draft day, almost nobody was paying attention. And somehow, that ended up being the worst mistake the league ever made. In the next part, we're going to skip the nostalgia, skip the fairy tales, and get straight to the moment where everything changed. The moment the NHL realized it had a problem. The NHL didn't reject Pavel Datsyuk. That would imply they saw him and made a decision. The truth is worse. They barely noticed him at all. While teams were obsessing over size, speed, and eye-popping numbers, Datsyuk existed in a blind spot. Not flashy enough, not loud enough, not obvious enough. The kind of player that only matters if you actually watch closely. And almost nobody did. He went through the draft once. Nothing. Twice. Still nothing. No panic. No headlines. Just silence. By the time Detroit finally selected him late in the draft, it didn't feel like a big decision. It felt like paperwork. Another name at the bottom of a long list. No cameras. No celebration. Even Datsyuk didn't believe it at first. That should have been the end of the story. Instead, it was the start of the problem. Because while the league moved on, Detroit didn't rush him. They let him stay out of sight. Let him develop without pressure. No spotlight. No noise. And in that quiet stretch, something important happened. Datsyuk didn't become louder. He became sharper. When he finally arrived in Detroit a few years later, he wasn't there to announce himself. He wasn't there to demand minutes or attention. He just played, and almost immediately, veterans started noticing patterns. They'd try to close space on him and miss. They'd reach for the puck and find nothing. They'd pressure him and somehow end up out of position. It wasn't chaos. It was precision. Scotty Bowman, one of the most demanding coaches the league has ever seen, trusted him quickly. That alone tells you something. Coaches don't hand trust to quiet rookies. They wait for mistakes. Datsyuk didn't make many. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't forcing highlights. He was solving problems in real time, reading reactions, breaking habits, turning tiny mistakes into full breakdowns. And here's the thing most people missed early on. Datsyuk didn't play faster than everyone else. He played earlier. He saw the play one step ahead, then waited for the rest of the rink to catch up, and by the time they did, it was already too late. That's why he fit so perfectly on a veteran-heavy team. He didn't disrupt anything. He elevated it. Detroit didn't need him to be a star right away. They needed him to be reliable. So he did both. By the end of his first season, he wasn't the headline, but he had a championship ring. And that's when the league really made its mistake. Because while everyone else was celebrating Detroit's depth, they completely missed what was growing inside it. They thought Datsyuk was a nice piece, a clever role player, a lucky late pick. They had no idea they'd just given him time. And time, for someone like Pavel Datsyuk, was the most dangerous thing of all. There's a moment in every player's career when the league stops being curious and starts being cautious. For Pavel Datsyuk, that moment didn't come with a press conference. It didn't come with a scoring title. It came quietly in the way opponents started playing him differently. Defensemen stopped stepping up, sticks stayed lower, feet got lighter, because by now, everyone had learned the same lesson the hard way. If you rushed him, you lost. If you waited, you still lost. Datsyuk had figured out something most players never do. The game wasn't about winning battles. It was about creating mistakes and then collecting them. He didn't attack defenders head on. He invited them in. One step the wrong way, one reach of the puck, one cross foot, and suddenly, a routine play turned into a highlight. Not because he was showboating, but because he understood how people react under pressure. That's why his best moments didn't look violent or explosive. They looked calm, almost casual. A defender thinks he's sealed the lane. Datsyuk slides through it. A goalie expects a shot. The puck ends up behind him. A forward feels safe with the puck and suddenly doesn't have it anymore. This wasn't luck. It was repetition. Night after night, he did the same thing to different players. And eventually, patterns emerged. Opponents stopped trying to outmuscle him. That didn't work. They stopped trying to outskate him. That didn't work either. So they hesitated. And hesitation is deadly, because Datsyuk lived in that half second where other players froze. That's where he took the puck. That's where he slipped past checks. That's where entire plays unraveled. And here's the part that really broke people's confidence. He didn't only do it when attacking. He did it when defending. Players would come down the ice thinking they had numbers, thinking they had space, and somehow, Datsyuk was already there. Stick in the lane, body in the way, puck gone. Not a big hit, not a scramble, just a clean theft. So clean that half the time, players didn't even realize what happened until they were skating the other way. That's when the reputation changed. Players stopped talking about his hands. They started talking about how uncomfortable he made them feel, how every touch felt risky, how every decision felt rushed. He didn't just beat you, he mentally exhausted you. By the mid-2000s, this wasn't opinion anymore. It was consensus. Ask players who they hated playing against most. Datsyuk's name came up again and again. Not because he trash-talked, not because he played dirty, but because he exposed you. Every shift. And while fans were replaying his goals, coaches were circling his number on whiteboards for a different reason. If he was on the ice, you had to think twice. By the time the rest of the NHL fully realized what Pavel Datsyuk was, it was already too late to stop him. This wasn't a breakout season anymore. This was a pattern. Every year, the same thing kept happening. Different teams, different matchups, same result. Datsyuk didn't just survive against top competition. He controlled it. Now the ice time went up. The responsibility went up. And instead of shrinking, he got better. This is the part of the story where most players chase numbers. More shots, more points, more attention. Datsyuk went the opposite direction. He didn't pad stats. He didn't force plays. He didn't abandon defense to look dangerous. And somehow, that made him even more dangerous. Coaches trusted him in every situation. Up a goal, he was out there. Down a goal, still out there. Final minute, no debate, because he wasn't guessing. He was reading. That's why the awards started coming. Not because the league wanted to celebrate him, but because they had no choice. When players around the league were asked who was the smartest, cleanest, most frustrating forward to play against, the answers kept pointing back to the same quiet guy in Detroit. Not flashy, not loud, just relentlessly effective. This is where the myth of Datsyuk started to solidify. Not through marketing, through experience. Players would go back to the bench shaking their heads. Coaches would rewatch tape and still not find a mistake until the third or fourth replay. And then came the season where everything clicked at once. Detroit was dominant. Datsyuk was everywhere. Not because he was chasing the spotlight, but because the game kept flowing through him. He was involved in goals, sure, but he was also breaking plays before they started, killing momentum, turning defense into instant offense. And in the biggest moments, he didn't disappear. Playoffs came, pressure increased, he got calmer. While other players tightened up, Datsyuk simplified. No extra moves, no panic, just clean decisions made faster than everyone else. That's how you end up with a second championship. Not as a passenger, but as a driver. By now, nobody was calling him a late-round steal anymore. They were calling him something else. Unique, because there was no template for him. No one else combined that level of creativity with that level of responsibility. No one else could embarrass you one shift and shut you down the next. And the most uncomfortable realization for the league was this. He wasn't slowing down. Pavel Datsyuk never announced that he was changing hockey. He never tried to. It just happened. While the league chased speed and size, something else started showing up in practices, in warm-ups, in late-night highlight searches. Young players weren't just watching goals anymore. They were watching how plays started and how they ended. They were watching Datsyuk, not for how fast he skated, but for how patient he was. Not for how hard he shot, but for how long he waited. Not for how much space he needed, but for how little. Slowly, almost quietly, his influence spread. You started seeing players hesitate with purpose. You saw them attack defenders' balance instead of their bodies. You saw them protect the puck like it mattered more than the shot. None of that was accidental. Datsyuk taught the league something uncomfortable. Creativity doesn't mean chaos. It means control. He proved that you could be imaginative and responsible at the same time. That you could embarrass someone and still be in perfect defensive position 5 seconds later. That combination was new, and it forced everyone else to adapt. Players started copying his moves. Then they started copying his patience. Then they started copying his awareness away from the puck. But here's the thing. They could copy the moves. They couldn't copy the timing, because timing isn't taught. It's felt. That's why so many players looked like a discount version of him. The ideas were there, but the understanding wasn't. Datsyuk didn't rush moments. He waited for them to crack. Even late into his career, when the league got younger and faster, he still found ways to control games. He didn't need breakaways. He didn't need perfect conditions. He needed one mistake. And that's why his legacy isn't just highlights. It's habits. You see it in how players steal pucks today. You see it in how they slow down defenders instead of try to blow past them. You see it in how creativity is now expected, not optional. Without speeches, without branding, without self-promotion. He influenced an entire generation by example. And when he finally stepped away, there was no dramatic farewell tour. No obsession with records. Just a quiet exit, the same way he played. Which brings us to the final question. How do you measure a player who changed everything without ever asking for the spotlight? That's where this story ends. When Pavel Datsyuk walked away from the NHL, there wasn't a dramatic ending. No chase for records. No farewell tour built around numbers. No speeches about legacy. He just left. And in a strange way, that was perfect. Because Datsyuk's impact was never about being seen. It was about being felt. You don't measure him by goal totals. You don't measure him by how many times his name led the league. You measure him by reactions. By defensemen slamming their sticks in frustration. By goalies staring in his space, replaying what just happened. By players admitting, years later, that he was the one guy who made them uncomfortable every single shift. That's a different kind of greatness. He won championships, sure. He collected awards, sure. But those were side effects. The real legacy is that the game looks different now. Players think more. They wait more. They value possession, deception, and timing in ways that weren't standard before. And they don't even realize where it started. Datsyuk proved that you don't need to dominate with force to dominate a game. He showed that you could win quietly. That you could embarrass someone without disrespecting them. That you could control chaos without becoming chaotic yourself. That's why he doesn't fit neatly into stat comparisons or debates. His value wasn't just what he created, it was what he took away. Time, space, confidence. And once those were gone, everything else fell apart. When he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, it didn't feel like a victory lap. It felt like a formality, a final acknowledgement of something players had known for years. Pavel Datsyuk wasn't just great, he was different. And long after the highlights fade, that's what will remain. The player who never chased the spotlight, yet somehow reshaped the game simply by understanding it better than everyone else. That's the story of the Magic Man. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, just the one nobody ever solved.